Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to this video. Now, I believe that one of the main ways in which the Israelites ended up in Africa was because they were fleeing from trouble. For example, here's a map of the region. There's Israel, and there's Egypt, and there's the rest of Africa is down here. This is the modern borders, obviously, of the region. And we see that Israel is right next to Egypt, or Mizraim. We know, for example, from the example of Abraham and also Jacob, that when there was famine in the land of Canaan, they went down into Mizraim. We can see this in Bereshit, or Genesis, chapter 12, verse 10, with Abraham, and also in chapter 46 and verse 7, it says that his sons, his sons' sons, his daughters and his sons' daughters, all his seed he brought with him to Mizraim. And why did they go to Mizraim? Because there was a great famine in the land of Canaan, and they went there to join Joseph, and they stayed there for a couple of 100 years. So I believe that they would have continued to do that through their history. When times were hard, through natural disaster in the land of Israel, they would move to another place, and that would be either temporarily or it would be permanently. And this is how I believe that many of the Hebrew population, the Israelite populations in Africa, would have originated. But it wasn't only famine that they would flee from. It would also be military trouble, military threats. And what we find is that most of the time, or very, very often, the threat would be coming from the north. Yes, the children of Israel had some trouble with the Edomites and the Moabites and Ammonites and the Philistines. But later on, especially when the kingdoms were divided, we find that most of the trouble came from the north, either from the Syrians, who were based in Damascus. They were often attacking Israel. And also, later on, the Assyrians defeated the Syrians, and then, lo and behold, they started to harass and attack, especially the kingdom of Israel. This again would result in refugees coming down further south into Yehuda. Eventually the Assyrians actually invaded Israel and conquered them, and took thousands of them to live into various parts of their kingdom, as we see that represented in this map here, how the Assyrians took over the land of the northern kingdom of Israel, and exiled the inhabitants far and wide into the sort of the Middle East region, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and probably going over into Afghanistan type area. So that's how the Israelite populations there originated. This, I believe, would have resulted in many people fleeing down into Yehuda, which had not been taken over by the Assyrians. But then the Assyrians began to harass Yehuda also, especially during the days of Hezekiah, the king Hezekiah. And again, that would result in refugees fleeing away from the northern threat, the threat that was coming from the north and the east. They would flee down into Egypt for safety. Now, eventually, the Assyrians themselves were defeated by Babylon, a resurgent Babylon. Babylon had been subdued by the Assyrians for a while, but Babylon had risen up again, and under Nebuchadnezzar, they expanded their empire. They took over Assyria, and they charged through like an elephant, toppling kingdom after kingdom after kingdom, and they began to harass and threaten Yehuda, the southern kingdom of Yehuda. Again, this would result in we know this resulted in refugees going down to Mizraim, because during the days of the prophet Yirmiyah, eventually the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem, took many of them into captivity, but there was a remnant left behind, and that included the prophet Yirmiyah. And he had a word from the Most High. He told the children of Israel that they should stay in the land and not be fearful of the Babylonians, but they should stay in the land of Israel, the land of Yehuda, and the Most High would protect them. But he also said this. He said, this is Yirmiyah 42 verse 13. If you say we're not staying in this land, and so disobey the voice of Yah, your Elohim, saying, no, but we are going to the land of Mizraim, so that we see no fighting, nor hear the sound of the ram's horn, nor hunger for bread, and there we shall stay, then hear the word of Yah, O remnant of Yehuda. Thus said Yah of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, if you indeed set your faces to enter Mizraim, and shall go to sojourn there, then it shall be that the sword which you feared overtakes you there in the land of Mizraim, and the scarcity of food of which you were afraid clings to you there in Mizraim, and you die there. And unfortunately, the children of Israel disobeyed the word of Yah. They disbelieved Yirmiyah was really giving them a word of Yah, and they chose instead to go into the land of Mizraim. And we see this in, I believe it's chapter 43. Yeah, it says, verse 5, and Yochanan, son of Kareah, and all the commanders of the army took all the remnant of Yehuda who had returned to dwell in the land of Yehuda from all nations where they had been driven, the men, the women, the children, the sovereign's daughters, every being whom Nebuzaradan, chief of the guard, had left with Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, son of Shaphan, and Yirmiyah the prophet, and Baruch, son of Neriah. So they went to the land of Mizraim, for they disobeyed the voice of Yah, and they went as far as Tapanes. So here we see that the entire remnant of the Yehudim, I should say, went into Mizraim. This is reflecting how they would move into Mizraim during times of trouble from the north. Now, what we find is that the prophet gave some pretty stark promises, saying that they were going to be, the word of Yah would come to pass, and they would see all kinds of trouble in Mizraim. And in verse 11, he says, and he shall come, and this is speaking about the Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar. He shall come and smite the land of Mizraim, bringing death to those appointed to death, captivity to those for captivity, and sword to those for the sword. And it carries on all the way through chapter 44 as well. The prophet gives some stark promises about what is going to come to pass to Mizraim, and what's going to come to pass to the Israelites who decided to dwell in Mizraim. And I believe that what would have happened is that those among the children of Israel, the remnant who had fled into Mizraim, once they heard these prophecies, so they're dwelling here in Mizraim in Egypt, the righteous ones, the remnant, once they heard these prophecies, they would have thought, you know what, I'm getting out of here. And they would flee away from Babylon, the Babylonian threat. Again, the Babylonians were coming from the north, from the Iraq region, coming through here. You would flee where? You would flee westward, further into Africa, and you would flee southward. This would be the more natural direction to flee. Follow the river Nile down south into Kush, and then follow the cataracts, going over eastward into Ethiopia, where there were Israelites there already, as we'll see in another video. And you would follow the White Nile as well, going down there further into the eastern Africa, into the region known as Uganda, and further south. So this is how I believe that many of the Israelite populations originated.